Hi everyone, I'm Lindsay Lewis, editor of Building Enclosure. Thanks for listening along with us today. The Oklahoma Contemporary Art Center recently opened Outré West, the American School of Architecture from Oklahoma to California. This new exhibition considers the bold works of a group of architects who were educated and mentored in Oklahoma in the 1950s and 60s, and later developed groundbreaking designs practices in California. Exhibition curators and professors of architecture at the University of Oklahoma, Angela Pearson and Stephanie Pilot, join us today to chat about the exhibition. Angela and Stephanie, thanks for sitting with us.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to start off with, what are outsider architects?
Well, in this case, these are a group of architects who were educated at the University of Oklahoma, as you noted. And at that time in the mid-century, almost all the other architecture schools were following the Bauhaus curriculum, which was about designing for generic sites and universal, so anyone, anywhere. And the work that came out of the Bauhaus was very boxy, minimalist modernism. So there was almost a recipe: flat roofs, ribbon windows, pilotis, modernist architecture as we know it. OU was one of the few schools of architecture that was doing something radically different. So the goal at the University of Oklahoma under Bruce Goff, Herb Green, and others was to foster individual creativity in students. So the one thing you couldn't do was to make architecture that looked like someone else's. So it was kind of a contest of who could be the most original and creative, while at the same time, architects were challenged to be realistic in their work. So it had to be buildable, it had to be resourceful and efficient, and it had to be grounded in specific sites, individual clients, landscapes that existed, as opposed to kind of generic, we can build a glass box in Miami or Minneapolis and it's fine, which is what other schools were doing.
Mm-hmm. Now, the title of the exhibition starts with Outré West. Now, I've never heard that term before. Where does that term come from?
Outré is a French term, and it actually comes from an architecture critic named Ada Louise Huxtable, who referred to Bruce Goff's work as outré fantasies. And so this is really meaning sort of wild or weird. And Goff's work, if you're familiar with it, is very unlike any other mid-century architecture that came before it or was happening at the time. And so Goff in this American School of Architecture really was creating or helping to teach and mentor other folks to practice in this way.
Now, can both of you chat about your favorite outsider architects?
Sure. One of my favorite from the exhibition is John Marsh Davis. So he's one of 5 architects who are showcased in the exhibition. He's originally from Oklahoma. He goes to OU and studies with Goff. And then he eventually lands in Sausalito, California, where he develops his practice. And his work, I knew nothing of it until a few years ago when one of our alumni, Donald McDonald, told us, you have to get his archive. He's one of the best. And we got his archive at the University of Oklahoma, and we began exploring it. And then we toured some of his projects, and they are magnificent. John Marsh Davis is an architect on par with Frank Lloyd Wright and Bruce Goff, but few people know about him. If you look at projects like the Barber House in Northern California, he combines wood and structure and landscape in views in really magnificent ways. Like, you look at his houses and you think, there's no place I'd rather live than in a John Marsh Davis project.
They're absolutely stunning houses. And I'll piggyback off of what Stephanie was saying to share just a little bit about Donald McDonald as well. So Donald actually coined the term the American School in reference to this, this way of teaching and educating architects. And Donald himself, he moved to San Francisco after completing his formal education. And since then, he has had just a wild practice that has spanned everything from building essentially tiny houses to house the homeless population in San Francisco. That became quite controversial, all the way to the east span of the Bay Bridge that you actually see on the Golden State Warriors jersey and everything in between. And he continues to practice to this day. And he really is very passionate about applying his American school education of contextual, resourceful, and experimental design to sort of every piece of the urban context and urban fabric.
Now, you touched on this a bit already, but can you tell us a bit about some of their unconventional practices? What made them so different from traditional architects?
Ooh, I would say one of the assignments that was developed at OU was called the orchestration of materials. And Goff would give students three materials. So it might be like copper tubing, ceramic tile, and wood shingles. And he would give them a week to develop a composition using those three materials. In other cases, we saw him assign wood shingles, and stone, and students were competing with one another to come up with the most magnificent, expressions of those three materials. So it might be ordinary materials, it might be strange materials, but the challenge was always the same, like do the most magnificent original architecture with these materials. And I like to think of it as the Chopped challenge. So if you've seen the TV show Chopped, where chef contestants get a basket of mystery ingredients and they have to show what a great chef they are by making something magnificent out of it. This is the same kind of thing Goff was doing for his students. So here's three ingredients, make something really fantastic out of those. And that is very much in contrast to what other schools were doing. They were really training line cooks to adapt, someone's recipe at many other schools, and Goff was training the equivalent of chefs.
I think that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
It is a good, really, really good way to put it. Okay, so we mentioned some iconic structures already, but can you talk maybe about some other ones to come out of this concept?
Yeah, I would love to share about Violetta Autumn's Cliff House, which is actually built on a cliffside in Sausalito. It's absolutely stunning. It exists to this day. You can drive by it in Sausalito. And she's one of the few women architects to be educated in the country at the time, and really also as part of the American School of Architecture. So after she graduated, she developed this home for her family. She raised her son in this house, and it was published nationally too. It gained a lot of attention. So the drawings were published as well as photos in architectural magazines. And so she really became a leader as a woman, doing these bold designs in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, and if I can add another example, the Post Ranch Inn by Mickey Munich is a great example of an iconic structure to emerge from this attitude towards architecture, this approach. Mickey Munich was hired to do this. It's a boutique hotel in Big Sur, California, along the coast. And the owners had this idea of a tree house, and they tried to hire another architect, and he was not giving them anything close to what they envisioned. And so they hired Mickey, who was known as kind of an odd character in Big Sur, an unusual guy, but a very creative visionary. And Mickey spent time sleeping, like camping out on different parts of the site in order to really understand how to build with the landscape. And so the Post Ranch Inn has tree houses in some places. It has structures dug into the landscape in other places. It's really integrated beautifully into the natural landscape in ways that we don't see as being so common at that time.
And I was in Sausalito area a couple years ago, and I'm bummed now hearing about all these great houses and structures. I wish I would have known then so I could have seen them in person.
Yeah, they're magnificent.
Yeah.
They're really amazing. And there are American School projects dotted around Sausalito as well. So when you go back,
including a houseboat in the Sausalito Bay. There's a houseboat by Robert Overstreet, which is magnificent and still there. I think it may be an Airbnb, but I'm not sure.
Oh, that's so cool. Is there a reason why they picked that area specifically?
Oh, that's a great question. I think these architects, Oklahoma in the early 20th century was very open in that it didn't have the long institutional traditions of the East Coast because it had only recently become a state.
Mm.
And I think by the mid-century, architects who were looking for that cultural openness and the grounds to experiment and to integrate architecture with the landscape were very drawn to California. And so we see a whole group of OU trained architects ending up especially in San Francisco, but really the West Coast in general.
Let's chat a little bit more about the actual exhibit. What makes it so awesome? What does it look like? Can you tell us about it?
So it's a really large exhibition. It takes up almost the entire second floor of the museum. And it has over 200 objects, many original objects, many custom architectural models of these amazing houses that we've been describing. So like Violetta Autumn's Cliff House is modeled beautifully and on display in the exhibition. It also has several full-scale architectural works. So Mickey Munich's personal studio is built at a one-to-one scale, taking up a large portion of the space. It's just, you can actually stand inside of it, which is incredible. You also enter through Mickey Munich's Moongate from his personal residence, which is quite amazing. A few other highlights are that we actually worked with an amazing architectural photographer, Bruce DeMonte, from the San Francisco Bay Area to photograph some projects that have never been documented this meticulously before. And he recorded footage of the coast of Big Sur so that as you enter the exhibition, you really get this feeling that you're on the California coast. And we could say a lot about the exhibition, but really the idea is that you get to know the works of not only American school students and how they were educated, but these 5 architects who really developed incredible careers in California, spanning lots and lots of different building typologies, and through drawings and photos and models and more, really.
Yeah, I would just add to that it includes a cookbook that Violetta Autumn designed and illustrated, and it is this beautiful cookbook with her sketches of ingredients and dishes, and it's called A Russian Jew Cooks in Peru because it's her mother's recipe. So her family were Eastern European emigres to Peru, which is where she grew up before she ended up in Oklahoma and then California. And then another favorite object for me in the exhibition is the wand. There's Mickey Munich was known as kind of a magician or almost like a mystical being in Big Sur. And the post-Ranchian clients, they were so pleased with what he had designed and helped see constructed for them that they had fabricated a wand, a magic wand for him with seashells and marbles in it. And there's inscribed on the wand, Magic Mickey, because that's what they called him.
Very cool.
It's really incredible.
Yeah.
And I think if we can highlight one more item, I'm sorry, but we haven't mentioned Art Dyson's work, and he is a really great architect in the Fresno area. And he had created this multi-dozen page survey for his clients, and there's selections of his client's survey spanning questions from where you read to as a child to do you prefer to have a front yard or a side yard or a backyard. He really wanted to get to know his clients in every way so that he could design really the perfect home.
So with all that being said, what can today's architects learn from this exhibition?
Oh, that's a great question. I think today, as we look back on the legacy of modernism, which really took over in the mid-century and became the predominant philosophy taught in architecture schools, we can see some great things to come out of that, but we can also see the destructive legacy of this idea that you can build the same glass box anywhere for anyone, especially when it comes to the impact on the environment. And so the American school architects offer this alternative precedent for designers today to look at and to see how these architects were designing with the landscape, using passive and active strategies for environmental controls, and really designing in response to individual people. As Angela noted, Arthur Dyson studied psychology, and he was so sincere in trying to understand his clients in depth, which is what led him to create this survey. And I think these are ideas that we now think of course, you should be designing for your clients in a very sincere way. And of course, architecture should respond to the site and be resourceful. But we don't have great precedents to look at. And I think the American School really offers that.
And just piggybacking off of Stephanie, there's also this idea that I think if you looked at the drawings of these projects, you might think you can't build that. That's just too wild. But as she mentioned earlier, they really were designed with construction in mind. And I think that today's architects can also look at these, really innovative concepts and then think about how do you work with the contractors, which these architects also did. It was so important to develop these long lasting, sometimes decades long, trusting relationships with contractors to be able to bring these really innovative ideas into the world.
Now, lastly, I want to ask, where can our listeners go to learn more?
I think the easiest place to go to learn more about the Outré West exhibition is the Oklahoma Contemporary Art Center's webpage, which has a lot of great information about not only the exhibition, but also the additional team of curators. This was only made possible with a group of amazing scholars and architects who supported it. And so we'd love for them to learn more about that. And then we have a few books about the American School. We have a book called Renegades, Bruce Goff and the American School of Architecture, which is available on Amazon. And then there's also a book on Outré West itself, which will be available for purchase on the Oklahoma Contemporary Art Center's website.
Well, thank you again, Angela and Stephanie, for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
If anyone listening has any questions about the exhibition, feel free to reach out to myself or Angela and Stephanie, and we'd love to continue the conversation. Until next time, visit us on buildingenclosureonline.com for your educational and technical resources.